5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have ignition. In your face, all over the place. We're online 24/7. 24/7. You're listening to the hottest internet station.
From beautiful Saline in southeastern Michigan.
Around the world at freedomtalkradio.net.
This is the 2009 Top 10 Webcam in the World winner. This is SETV.
Well, good evening or good afternoon, everybody. How are you doing? Bill Zam here. It is another fabulous Saturday evening where we are doing Surrounded by Idiots. And tonight, I've got a couple of surprises for you. First of all, we are running the video side of the show. We have the video stream up and running. All you have to do is go to freedomtalkradio.net and click on the big link at the top that says watch here or click here or whatever it says on that link that I put up on the website a few minutes ago. But I am running the video side of the show, so you'll be able to see what I am referring to, all the websites and everything, and you can also see me on the camera right now. How you guys doing? I hope everybody has had a good week. This is actually, we're a little bit off schedule. Normally we do our show on Saturdays at 5 o'clock, but my business partner, Andy Peacher, over there in the UK, has had some issues, and he was not able to do his 12 o'clock show. So I have gone ahead and gone a little bit earlier, and we are going to have somebody on the air with us in a few minutes as soon as I do my little opening monologue. I was listening the other day. In fact, I was having a conversation just a few minutes ago that is actually related to this. A little bit of that divine intervention just came up and struck out of the blue just a few minutes ago. You see, the other day I was sitting at work and I was listening to some music. I flipped open the Android tablet and opened up the MP3 player and started playing songs. The very first song that came up on the MP3 player kind of left me melancholy, and it was a pretty bizarre situation because you wouldn't really consider a song leaving me somebody melancholy at work while they're working away, but this one did. It was actually Johnny Cash's Man in Black. It was a song of his that he wrote about why he always wore black. Essentially, it was because there's so many downtrodden people around the world. He said in the song, "I'll wear bright colors when the problems are solved, when the poor people have something to their name, when the hungry have something to eat, when the man that spent more than enough years in prison has paid his time and has been released." It reminded me of something that happened probably 15, 17 years ago now, back in the late 1990s. As most of our listeners know, if you have watched our shows in the near past, I had a guest on by the name of Lane Herman. He wrote this book right here. It's called Enterprise, the very first everything you need to know about the space shuttles. Because you see, he became a friend of mine because in the late 1990s, 1999 I believe it was, or 98, I was invited down to NASA by the media director down there. I was one of the very first online-only journalists that they invited down to NASA. And we had a neighbor across the street. His name was Rich, and he was married. He had a wife, and they were good friends of ours. And his wife's daughter, I believe this was his second wife, her daughter was a big music manager. She managed some of the biggest names in country music. The one group that she managed the most was a group that won a lot of CMA awards in the mid-90s, and I can't remember the name of the group for the life of me. I've been racking my brain all day. But they were good friends of ours, and, you get kind of used to tour buses showing up on the street and parking at the neighbor's house and meeting some rather famous people several times a year, because when they're out on tour, they'd stop by and see Rich and his wife, and it was great. At any rate, Rich was he was a factory rat. He worked at the Ford plant in Ypsilanti, and he decided along the way, he and his wife decided that what he was going to do is he was going to work as much as possible. He was working 6 and sometimes 7 days a week so that he could retire early. He wanted to retire when he was 55, same age I am right now. He was going to retire, and they were going to spend their retirement years, still relatively young, together, and have fun, travel around the world and everything, and just enjoy their life together. And about 6 months before he was due to retire, he was on a catwalk at the plant, and his foot slipped off the catwalk, and he broke his ankle. So his retirement was delayed by 6 months because he had his foot in his cast, he couldn't work, he was on disability and everything, and he finally went back to work. And the day before we were leaving for Florida for my big trip to NASA, it was his last day at work. It was his retirement day. This is his last day. He wasn't even going to work a full day. He was going to come home early, probably. They're going to have a big retirement party and everything for him at work. And he gets up, and he gets ready for work, doesn't wake his wife up, lets her sleep. He gets ready for work, and just before he leaves for work, he goes to wake up his wife, and she's dead. Body's still warm. She died on the day that he was going to retire. And that taught me a big life lesson that I didn't realize until a lot later. That is this. When you do a show like this, or whatever it is that you do, you have to assume that every time you sit in front of a camera or a microphone, or any time you see somebody, like your spouse or your kids, you have to assume that's the last time you're ever going to see them. That's the way I live my life. That's the reason why I put so much into these shows, because every show could be my very last one. I could drop dead right now, and my legacy would be what you see of me in my whatever's left of me afterwards online on these shows. And it's extremely important for me to remember that. And I wanted to remind you guys of that because the fella who is at the other end of the line and I were talking about something very similar just a few minutes ago. And I'm going to bring up the microphone right now. Get ready, Tim, because here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to present to you somebody who is on this show for the first time. It's Tim Spearman. He is usually on the air on Saturdays at noon Eastern with Andy Peacher. And since Andy couldn't do his show, Tim was kind of like floating around in the Ethernet a little bit. And I said, hey, Tim, you want to come on the show? And he said, sure. So here he is. Without further ado, Tim Spearman. Tim, how are you doing?
I'm very, very fine to be here with you. That's a pleasure and a joy. And we haven't been on together for a while, and I'm very, very happy to be here. And poor Andy, I wish he could be with us, but, well, we'll see. Next time, maybe we can all do a show together. That'd be nice. We can have you on our airwaves and do a show with the three of us maybe sometime soon.
Yeah, we should do that. We could, maybe we can do that next week, depending on how Andy's situation's going. Andy has some rather significant issues that he's undergoing right now. I'm going to be talking to him tomorrow. I will extend the entire audience's well wishes to him and his family as they go through these times of trials. And Tim, we were talking, we were talking just a few minutes ago about trials, tribulations, and difficulties that we go through. And I thought you had a rather unique point of view, very similar to the one that I was just talking about a few minutes ago. And I told you before we went on the air, that's pretty spooky that you said what you said just before we went on the air, and I gave my little commentary.
Right. I see your point. Well, I my background's in philosophy, and so that's been an influence in the path I've taken in life, and in terms of the different subject areas that I've explored and tackled in my lifetime, I've kind of amazed myself, because I never really thought that I would be exploring so many different research areas and so many different topic areas. And, to a certain extent, that's true of my colleague Andrew, my associate Dr. Carly, and yourself. And I think when you live in times such as these, you kind of have to become a Renaissance person that's aware of all parameters and all things, because we're under assault and it's coming from all sides, and unless you know how the banking industry works and how the business world works and how the political realm operates and military and all things under the sun, you're not going to be able to grapple with the forces that are arrayed against you and the rest of humankind. And if you're going to be a person that wants to help remedy the situation and make things better, then you had better brush up on your various topic areas and know what's happening in your world. So metaphysics and spirituality and religion is just one of the many interests that I have. So, and that includes New Age type philosophies that have been introduced in recent years. And when I see that these things connect, I see that there must be something profound in the message, because why would the new information somehow make more clear what we've been told in terms of religion and the message of the prophets down through the ages? And when you see it expressed in a new paradigm and in a new language and in a new semantics, you think, okay, well, this is recapitulating the same message. It's just that it's appealing to a scientific audience of today. So they refer to different dimensions as opposed to the different spiritual realms or the 33 heavens or whatever. 33 dimensions, 33 heavens. What really is the difference between these concepts? Nothing, really. It's just semantics. It's about differences of language and difference of understanding, but ultimately they're all talking about the same things. The prophets of modern time versus the prophets of olden time. And so that's kind of why I brought up the topic that we were just discussing before we came on the air.
Do you think maybe with all of the, I don't know, with all of the convergences that we're seeing, do you think something big's coming our way? Maybe. I kind of feel that way. I kind of feel like, all through the ages, you always hear, the end times are here, the end times are here. But it seems to me that over the past 10, 15 years, the convergence of all of this stuff is coming closer and closer together, and it's kind of makes you nervous one way, but in another way, it's kind of peaceful, because it just seems like something big is going to happen, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I see it almost like coming to a vortex which resembles the girdle of an hourglass, where we're coming to the point of convergence in the middle, and time is coming to an end in terms of end times, and there's only a few granules left in that little girdle of the hourglass, and then when we come out the other end of the vortex, there's nothing but expansion and growing potential, and not only an expansion of human consciousness, but an expansion of possibility. I mean, Greg Braden talks about how the drag on human consciousness will be less pronounced as the vibrational frequency or the base resonance frequency of the planet increases, so that we will be subject to less of a gravitational field, and so that travel will be faster, the influence of gravity will be lessened, and even our thoughts will travel at greater speed. So the ability to move from conception to realization will be reduced in terms of a time frame. We'll be able to accomplish far more faster and with greater speed and agility. Everything will happen at a faster pace, and I can see that that's the case. I mean, I could put a book together in a month. I can write a screenplay in extraordinarily quick time. I'll share a little story with you. I wrote a 13-part TV mini-series about the Air India bombing in a week.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, I know that doesn't mean that it's perfect, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't need editing and so forth, but to accomplish a project of that scale in so short a time just indicates how expansive our consciousness has become, and how quickly we can engage a project, and with the technology at our fingertips, how quickly we can accomplish certain things. So, yeah, we are becoming, as Jesus said we would, ye are like unto gods. It seems we are getting to that point where we're becoming exceptionally capable creatures.
Huh. What do you think is causing that?
Well, I think our consciousness is expanding, and we're becoming more enlightened, and I think our own frequency is rising, and we're becoming less dense as matter is concerned, and more like light beings, and our consciousness is expanding, our DNA is changing. There was a UCLA study done a few years ago, and it indicated that of the 64 codons in our DNA, most humans only had 20 switched on, and the others were misguidedly seen as junk DNA. And it's interesting that they've identified 64 codons in our DNA because there's 64 hexagrams, 64 hexagrams in the I Ching, the Chinese book of divination that was supposed to have been devised by Confucius. But it's an interesting book, and to think of human life and our DNA sequences as a book of life and as a book of divination in its own right, so that your fate and your destiny is actually linked to how many codons are turned on in your DNA. Well, just like a computer program, if certain keys are switched on, you're going to be able to develop a more elaborate program, and if certain keys are not switched on, there's limitations. Well, so too is it seemingly so with the human DNA. And so what they discovered is that about approximately, they estimated 1 million people on the planet had an extra 2 codons in their DNA switched on. So they were up to 22. And they tested their blood, and they put it in Petri dishes, and they subjected it to HIV, AIDS, and Ebola, and all these terribly rapacious and nasty bugs and disease pathogens, and they found that these test subjects, were immune to disease.
Huh. Isn't that something?
Isn't it? So I think disease is not just strictly pathogen related. We have all kinds of diseases, and they can be seen at the spiritual level, or the consciousness level, or at the mental level, or they can be seen in the physical. But they're just different planes of manifestation of the same imbalance and disorder, which really has to do with how in league or how in harmony we are with the Tao, or if you want to put it in God terms, how harmonious we are with the will of God, or, I mean, there's different ways of putting it, but I see where some days I'm on and some days I'm off, and at least I've been blessed with the honesty to be able to honestly tell what's going on with me in my life, and I try to, be as honest as I can, and most people, unfortunately, are too fearful and too scared to do that because they don't want to be persecuted, and so they pretend to be perfect and then to not have these aberrations in their character or in their personality, and ultimately that dark horse that lives within them is going to come to the surface whether they try to hold him down in restraints or not. So they had better be honest and let him come forth, because if you try to suppress these things and deny them and try to deny that they're there, they're going to come rearing their ugly heads to the surface anyway.
This is very true. Fortunately for those folks, there are people like you and I that are willing to stick our heads up above the edge of the trench, and we're willing to get shot at every once in a while for putting forward our point of view and, taking the hard licks, I suppose, from the powers that be.
Yeah, I mean, we are linked, and it's hard to reach that point of honesty where you realize that the dark horse you're criticizing is really just a manifestation of your own dark horse, and to reach the point of realization where there is no other, but there is only self, and that the dichotomy between self and other is an illusion and it's not really there, that's a tough one to reach. And so one learns to forgive one's enemies when one realizes that it is just simply a manifestation of your own dark horse. And so once one grapples with one's own dark horse and reins it in, then the enemy on the other side is restrained as well. And so I'm coming to that point, and still haven't got there, but I think there's a greater sense of realization awakening within me, and I just hope that that continues to progress and bear its wanted, much needed, and desired fruit.
Speaking of which, there's we still have the mystery of Flight 370 hanging like an albatross around our necks. Everybody has a pet theory of what might have happened to these poor people that were on this plane. I've got a pretty good sound clip from a retired general that appeared on television earlier this week, and I was wondering what is your pet theory as to what happened to this aircraft?
Well, I've looked at all of them, ranging from industrial espionage type activity because of the passengers on board being connected with a company developing software and also an electric car technology, and there seems, in my view, to be some connection to the Rothschilds. And so when I look at the fact that they've had a strong influence in the world's intelligence services and in intelligence gathering and in the technologies employed by the military intelligence world, would they be capable of doing this? Would they be capable of making a plane disappear from the radar and disappear seemingly from planet Earth? And Would they have motive and opportunity? Yes. And then you and I, were talking about how many theories are out there. Whenever you see this many theories surrounding an event, it's obvious that the authorities are trying to hide something. And so military intelligence is definitely involved. And the sheer proof of that is the fact that there's so many competing theories on what's actually happened to this flight. Because that is the very nature of black operation. They're trying to do the X-Files thing where the truth is out there, but there's so many competing truth theories that you'll never get to the bottom of it, and you'll be so confused that you'll eventually just give up and throw your hands up in despair and say, I haven't a clue what happened to that darn flight. It's just a mystery. Well, it's not a mystery. Military intelligence is behind it. The question is who and why. Doesn't really matter who. The who doesn't matter because all the military intelligence agencies of the world are controlled by this same cabal. Now, you could say, well, that's the Vatican, or you could say that that's the Dark Cabal, or you could say that that's the Satanic Camp, or whatever. The point is that the puppet masters, those that are ruling the roost, those that are controlling all the world's intelligence services, the all-seeing eye cult, whatever you want to call them, they're behind this. And it doesn't matter whether it was this left hand or this right hand or which hand was behind it, because all the intelligence services are part of the all-seeing eye cult. They're all part of the same rubric, the New World Order, whatever you want to call it. The question is, really more to the point, why? Why did they do it? So we can continue to banter back and forth, but why do you think they did it, Bill?
Well, I have, last week I spent an hour and a half talking about this and exploring all of the different theories, options, things that could have happened to the flight. Right now up on the screen for those of you on the video side of the show, and this will be up on the freedomtalkradio.net, the video portion of the show along with the audio archive. I have the flight path that we know the plane took from the radar that the Malaysian military and other militaries were able to figure out thus far. And we know that the plane hit some what they call waypoints, which are points set up where aircraft make turns on, I suppose, ships as well. I think the ocean shipping industry has different waypoints, but it hit waypoints and made turns at waypoints. So we know the thing was under intelligent control. So it wasn't. I don't think it was a fire on board. I don't think it caught fire and everybody succumbed and the plane just kept flying until it ran out of fuel. I don't think that's what happened, judging by how many intelligent type turns that it made. My theory on this, my feeling, is that this plane was taken, either hijacked or the pilots did it, or there's a distinct possibility also that given the computer systems on this aircraft and that Boeing had put out an alert last year that the computer systems on that plane can be compromised remotely, either from the passenger compartment or completely from outside of the aircraft. And the aircraft could be flown by remote control, either from the passenger compartment or like a drone from a facility someplace else. So my thought was that this aircraft was taken to, I guess, by persons unknown, possibly major actors. And this past week, General McInerney, I don't know if you've ever heard of him or not. He's a retired general. He's a retired Air Force general. His name's Thomas McInerney. He apparently has come across some information and has worked up I guess you could call a point of view or a theory about this. And I have some sound clips from a television show that he was on. He was on Sean Hannity's show earlier this week, and it was very interesting because he wasn't going out on a limb, and he wasn't talking about, he wasn't willing to go too far down the road of his theory because he didn't want names to be named or apparently get himself in trouble. So I'm going to play parts of this clip, and I have the questions that Hannity asked him. And the first one was, and these are questions that a lot of people have been asking on the website, freedomtalkradio.net. I've had a running series of articles about this, and these are some of the very same questions that I had. And the first question that he was asked is, did the aircraft have enough fuel to make it all the way to Pakistan?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Sean. As it turns out, we got the last ping 7 hours after takeoff. For whatever reason, they apparently had put more fuel into it. It may be their standard practice, so they don't have to buy fuel up in Beijing. It may be more expensive. I don't know. But I'm taking the data that says they got a ping their last ping was 7 hours after.
And then he asked him, how long, assuming the thing went to Pakistan, Afghanistan, maybe Western Iran, that was within the flight range of the aircraft with that load of fuel on it, how long would it take to get to the country of Pakistan?
Well, it's about 3,500 miles, 7 hours, 500 miles true, let's say. And they went north for partially. So say 3,000 miles, 3,200 miles, something like that. Of course, there now appears to be evidence that there was a direct course through India flying in a shadow of a Singapore Flight 68. That hasn't been verified. The only thing that I have seen that is starting to become verified is the LigNet report that from Boeing saying that they believe the airplane was in Pakistan, which I talked about on Friday.
Now, I'm going to kind of break in here. What I saw last week was some of the data from the jet engines. And the jet engines send data to Rolls-Royce, the manufacturer, so that they can keep an eye on all of the parameters of the airplane, how much parts are wearing, how much fuel it takes to make X amount of power, and other parameters of the engines. And apparently one of the last pings, as McInerney called it, that they got from the engines was that the engines were on the ground and idling as if the aircraft had landed. My question would be, would the engines send that if they had run out of fuel and were just basically coasting in for a crash into the ocean, like some people have been putting forward? The next question that Hannity asked him is this. You've spoken to a lot of people. Is that correct?
Yes, but that's all I want to say, Sean. Please.
All right, no.
And the next question, you can tell he's a little bit uptight. If you see the video of this, you can tell his body language. He's uptight over this question. I don't know if it was staged or not. I can't say, but he did look uptight to me. Hannity asked him, do you believe that this aircraft is intact and that it, in fact, landed?
I do.
And that was a very short answer. The next question that I asked him is, what about the passengers? What do you think may have happened to the passengers?
I don't know anything about their status. What I do know is the most sensors that we have in the world are in that region. They're not in the south of the Indian Ocean. We've got a lot of sensors up there, so we have a lot of capabilities. And I believe with Rolls-Royce and with Boeing, as well as the U.S. government, we know a lot more than that is coming out. I suspect we may, in the next 24 to 48 hours, start hearing from either the Malaysian government or the Pakistani government. If the Pakistani government doesn't talk soon, they're going to be complicit in this.
And that is a very telling answer there. The next question is there anything else you can share with the audience if what you believe is true, what do you fear most if, in fact, this is a correct scenario?
Well, first of all, let me say, when the U.S. Navy quits their ship search, they must know something in the Indian Ocean. When the Israeli Defense Forces, when they increase their air defense alert, they must know something. They're questioning people further out. For those people that say, well, even with the transponder off, they'd have gotten a skin paint. Most people don't realize the crew on at 2, 3, 4, 5 in the morning is not the A-team, and they primarily use transponders. So it doesn't surprise me that this could have happened the way I am describing it.
So this would explain...
Oh,
go ahead. I'm sorry, sir.
Well, and the airplane would have landed 8 o'clock Kuala Lumpur time is 3 o'clock Pakistani time in the morning. 5 o'clock. There's a 3-hour difference. So it would have been dark. Anyone who says they saw this overfly the Maldives or whatever, it was dark. I don't see how anybody could say that. There's been a lot of strange information put out on altitudes and a whole host of things. And a lot of it's come from the Malaysian government. So we've got to be able to sort through this. My concern is if this airplane could be used as a bearer of a weapon of mass destruction or even conventional munitions that could attack a carrier, the Israelis, other allies, American forces, for instance. We have to be very alert until we know exactly where this airplane is.
Now, the last 3 questions that Hannity asked him, I think, are critical to this particular conversation. And the next question is that Hannity says, I would put forth that the Pakistani government is complicit right now. Is that a fair assessment in your opinion?
I think that's a fair observation. The way the Boeing report came out in Lignet, it said the airfield was in Taliban-controlled areas. Well, I think that's saying in western Pakistan. And there are 3 primary bases, 2 are main operating bases, and one's a satellite base that could handle this aircraft in the Pakistani Air Force. So there are other Falcon bases, but I'll talk about that later.
And the second to the last question is the same thing that I said last week on the show, that this theory of the plane being hijacked, taken to, he's saying Pakistan, I was thinking Afghanistan, possibly Iran. I'll show you the flight range of the aircraft graphic as soon as I'm done playing this clip. But he says this theory would explain the transponders being turned off. It explains the pings from the engines 7 hours into the flight, as well as the flight path being diverted by computer. And this particular theory answers all of the questions that everybody has about what about all of the mysteries and instances of the aircraft changing course and whatnot, doesn't it?
It would, and I believe both pilots may have been complicit. I believe that, remember, they turned off, they didn't turn off communications, they turned off navigation aids. They didn't turn off their HF radio, there's VHF radio, their UHF radio. So they had the SATCOM, and so they had communications that they were listening to what was going on, and I think probably were transmitting to the location they were going to. That's why I think the U.S. vacuum cleaners, those sensors that pick up all this stuff, have probably been able to detect more than we're getting.
And the last question, the most important question of all that Hannity asked him, so there's a very good possibility that the United States knows more than they're telling us.
I think they do, and I think they want to be very cautious because they don't want to embarrass certain other nations that we're working close with, et cetera. And but the best leaks have come out of the U.S. government.
So, Tim, what do you think of that?
Well, he's not acting, and he's not lying, and I know quite a bit about the psychopath personality, and he doesn't fit the profile. I don't trust too many people in the military, but you're looking at the testimony of a very ethical and decent man, in my view. He's trying to be as honest and upright as possible, and he's trying to disclose everything he can within the limits of his job. There's a man of integrity speaking. You can trust what he's saying. That's my view. And do you agree?
I have a tendency to agree. I've seen I don't know General McInerney. I've never talked to him, but from what I see of the guy on his interviews and what he has written, I don't think that he would jeopardize his reputation and his future and his basically his job, because he's retired now. His job is to give accurate assessments of what he thinks is going on. I don't think that he would jeopardize any of that just for a crazy half-cocked theory. And I think he's telling us what he believes to be the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got up on the screen right now the flight range of the aircraft. And if you're watching on the video side, you can see that the thing could have made it all the way into Pakistan, Afghanistan, Western Iran, the country of Oman, Nepal, Kyrgyzstan, Mongolia, South Korea, Japan. It could have even made it down to certain portions of Australia with the fuel load that was on board the aircraft. So what he's saying is a distinct possibility. However, I will also say that the latest theories, I guess you could call it, that the little governments have been putting forward about finding debris down in the Indian Ocean, you can see that that area of the Indian Ocean is also within the flight range of that aircraft. And I personally think that that is a dead end right there. I think that's I think there's two sides of this, Tim. I think there's the one side that knows what happened, and the other side that's letting everybody fumble about in the dark, pretending that they're still looking for the airplane. I think that's what we're seeing here. I think we're seeing one side that knows exactly where the aircraft is, possibly a hostage situation, trying to get the people out safe, or trying to get whatever cargo is on board the plane out of there. And I think the other half is just not doing a fake search, but doing a search what they believe is in good faith.
Okay. Good theory, good thoughts. I go with direct evidence on this one because, well, direct evidence is usually regarded as the most reliable form of evidence, and this is what the witness claims to have apprehended at the scene of an incident or a crime. The problem I have with documentary evidence in its various forms in today's world is that we've reached a point in technology where everything can be doctored. Therefore, if anything is presented to me, like these lovely maps that you're showing me, with the military radar tracking of the waypoints showing where the plane was last picked up on radar and everything, I don't trust it. What I do trust, though, is the grassroots, and I trust the people, and I trust the man on the street and what he claims. And if a man on the street says he looked up into the sky and he saw an unidentified flying object, I would much more tend to believe the man on the street with his direct evidence than I would a government source or the military or any of our so-called official channels, which are supposed to be respectable organizations that are there to disclose what's really happening and what's really truthful, because they've lied to us so many times that I don't believe a single solitary word that comes out of any of their mouths at this point. And what I'm getting is that, according to a local newspaper, residents of a remote island in the Maldives, which is called Kuda Havadu, spotted a plane at 6:15 a.m. local time on March 8th and could have been the missing Malaysian Airlines 370. which puts it far off track based on the military radar diagram that you have provided to me. It's not near the Andaman Sea, it's way out, far flung from there. Eyewitnesses cited by the paper said they saw a jumbo jet, white with red stripes across it, flying low and very low. The description of a big airplane in those colors is consistent with the Malaysian Boeing 777. So the island said they did not recall ever seeing an airplane there and at that height before, making it unlikely that what they had seen was a normal takeoff or landing by another passenger jet. 6:15 a.m. in the Maldives is 9:15 a.m. in Malaysia, so the sighting would have occurred 7 hours and 45 minutes after the last radio contact, the now famous all right good night, which had supposedly occurred at 1:30 a.m. Malaysian time over the Gulf of Thailand. A 777 Series 200 ER with a nearly full load of 227 passengers and 12 crew, cargo, and fuel for the scheduled 5.5-hour trip from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, plus reserves, would typically be able to stay in the air for a maximum of about 8 hours. That makes the presence of the aircraft at 6 in the morning, local time, in the Maldives, in the middle of the northern Indian Ocean, technically possible. In fact, the distance between the point of last radio contact and Kuda Hovadu Island is 2,000 miles, which is a 777 at cruise speed would cover in far less time. Flying in a straight line from the Gulf of Thailand, MH370 would have appeared over the island no later than 3 a.m. local time, well before sunrise. But the plane may not have flown in a straight line for whatever reason, possibly a hijacking and maybe the crew's attempt to foil it, or it may have flown at very low level to avoid detection where the air is thicker and jet planes fly slower because of added drag. I think what this article doesn't raise as a point of speculation is whether it might not have stopped to refuel in some locale and to then head off in a slightly deviated flight path towards the Maldives. Anyway, it may also have been flying at reduced speed to conserve fuel, either because whoever controlled the plane wanted to maximize its range or because jet engines are less efficient at low altitude. One thing the Maldivian eyewitnesses did not mention is seeing signs of the onboard fire that some experts say could have incapacitated or killed the crew while the plane kept flying on autopilot. The idea of a fire as cause for MH370 crashing was first floated by a pilot on Google Plus last weekend and went viral. It rests on the assumption that the pilots, far from being in on some nefarious plot, were heroes who steered the plane toward the most convenient airport for an emergency landing as soon as they realized that they had a fire or some other grave problem. That airport would have been on the island of Langkawi off the west coast of Malaysia, exactly on the compass heading that the plane took when it turned westward over the South China Sea. Then the crew succumbed to the fire or to lack of oxygen, and the plane kept flying on autopilot until it ran out of fuel. But the fire plus emergency diversion theory, as compelling as it might be, leaves out one very important point. If the pilots tried for a landing at Langkawi and missed because they became incapacitated, the autopilot would have kept them flying straight and level on the last compass heading, which would have taken MH370 more or less over Kuda Hovadu, by the way. Well, yeah, we know from Malaysian military radar tracking that after passing the west coast of Malaysia, MH370 zigzagged north and south toward the Andaman Islands, following precise waypoints. Shortly before reaching the Andaman Island chain, it lost radar contact and might have possibly made the Maldives before disappearing toward one of the two arcs, one in Central Asia, the other off the west coast of Australia, where satellite pings say it must have ended its flight.
Interesting. Where are short of me calling up Google Maps here, where exactly are the Maldive Islands?
As the crow flies, they're 2,000 miles away from the point of last radio contact off the coast of Malaysia, and it's, as the crow flies, it's slightly under, well, if you were to fly past the island of Sri Lanka, or the country of Sri Lanka, you're looking at about a 200 to 300 mile off-coast range flying past, and then you're ending up in a corresponding longitude parallel that would coincide with India's far western coast.
So somewhere, well, that would put it pretty close to Pakistan then, wouldn't it?
No, way too far south. We're looking at below Sri Lanka, with the Arabian Sea within hailing distance, but you're well below the lowest Cape point of India.
Okay. So, in other words, if they had continued basically on a straight course, we're talking something like Somalia?
Ooh, geez.
That was one thing that I heard.
You know what? You might be right about that. Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, I looked it up last week before I discarded that particular theory about the Maldive Islands and somebody seeing it. But I believe that's just a little bit outside of the range of the aircraft, right there in Somalia.
Yeah, I think it would be on a line with that part of East Africa, actually, yeah.
So then you'd have to consider Somalian air pirates.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And we know that's not out of the realm of possibility. I wouldn't put anything past those clowns in Somalia at all. So that is another extremely interesting theory, I guess. I mean, it just gets more and more bizarre the more you look into this, doesn't it, Tim?
It sure does. I mean, I wouldn't like to be quoted on that one, but I don't think it's ever going to turn up.
I don't think so either. If it does, it's going to be painted a totally different color, and you're not going to get any debris from it after it hits whatever it's going to hit. Which, another aspect of this that I have heard and sort of been concerned with is that the aircraft, if it is used for any type of a terrorist attack, could go a couple of different ways. I've heard one that I don't really consider to be very... There's two that I don't really consider to be very viable, and one would be somebody would take it and use it for a false flag in Ukraine. I don't consider that to be a viable theory at all. Another one was, I'm sure you've heard this one, using it for an EMP attack against the United States. And again, that's not viable. You could do the same thing with a missile from a boat parked in international waters. You could get a much more effective range for something like that. So I don't like either one of those. The one that I paid most attention to is that, if I'm not mistaken, the World Islamic Bank is in Malaysia, as well as their own version of the Twin Towers, which is the Petronas Towers, where apparently about 20% of the world's financial operations runs through at any one given time. And if one wanted to really, really damage the world economy, the petro economy, as well as, I believe, a lot of technology, crashing a plane in the Petronas Towers would achieve that effect, if I'm not mistaken.
That is a great insight and theory, and it's come our way through one of our regular listeners that idea occurred to him. I don't exactly know from where the idea materialized, but he's often gifted in that regard and coming up with insights about these events. And what I think you just hit upon is a strong possibility. And well, I teach in the security field and have extensive knowledge about that field at certain levels. And if a Brinks guard, say, in Toronto loses his gun or misplaces it or leaves it in a public place, he's automatically fired, because you can well imagine that if anyone finds a gun that belongs to someone of that importance, they could easily then steal the gun, sell it, and then it could be deployed in a crime, and the ballistics would trace the crime back to who? Well, the careless Brinks guard that happened to leave his gun in public. And so you can understand why it's such a serious offense for an officer or a security guard or a Brinks guard to actually lose his gun. It doesn't make the police force look very respectable when a gun is then deployed in a crime and ballistics traces the crime back to a officer of the justice system. I mean, that just looks appalling. That looks terrible. So one of the advantages of taking a plane like this and hijacking it is that you can then perpetrate a crime and frame certain suspects and have ballistics, just like a gun that's deployed in a crime, trace the crime back to, well, who but maybe the pilots, which are being set up as patsies to take the fall for a covert operation involving military intelligence, which is meant to take the New World Order to the next step in its long-term chess game devised by people like Zbigniew Brzezinski. And what do they want to ultimately do but take down the non-usury-based banking system of the Islamic world in the hope of foisting this debt-based economic system on the entire world? That would be the final checkmate, I would say, in terms of establishing the Antichrist empire on Earth.
Yeah, that's yeah, exactly. Looking at the tenants that are in the Petronas Towers, there's two towers. Tower 1 is completely occupied by the Petronas company. That's a petroleum company. They have a bunch of subsidiaries and smaller companies that they own that are also headquartered there. In Tower 2, you have Huawei Technologies, Avia, Al Jazeera, Bloomberg, Boeing, IBM, one company I'm not even going to begin to try to pronounce, McKinsey & Company, TCS, HLC Technologies, Crawler, Microsoft, and a modeling agency, as well as a news corporation. So, I mean, Petronas is a big petroleum company that a lot of the world's oil goes through Petronas's hands at some point. So that would be a devastating blow, I would think, to the petroleum industry as a whole, don't you think?
Yeah, I remember when I did a show once with George Freund on Conspiracy Cafe, I was talking about how there's this old treatise from the Hindu world called the Atha Shastra, and the way the royal family insulates itself and maintains power and control is by creating several castes within society and then creating several layers of government, so that they can have different levels of government beneath them, each of which is so embroiled in infighting that they fail to see or even notice those that preside above them on the next tier or level of government. And so by the time you get to the top with the royal family, you have no one paying attention to who's really in charge, because everyone's so embroiled in their own infighting at the various levels of government, and even contending with one another at different levels of government in terms of the tier system, that they've completely been distracted from who's really holding the strings of power at the top. So it is that they designed their temple building, their fortress, their palace, in such a way that you'd have these series of concentric circles where you'd have to penetrate the outer perimeter wall, and then you'd have all these inner perimeter walls that you'd have to breach before you could actually reach the royal family, that are holed up in the middle of this palace temple building that's nicely protected by the strongest contingent of guards and the best security available at the inner sanctum level of the palace. And then you've got this little trip lever that, in case the palace is breached and its security is compromised, they can escape by pulling this trip lever, which opens up a staircase that leads to an underground escape route that leads up into the mountains somewhere with an unknown destination point. So when they come out at the other end, probably not even they will know precisely where they are, and then they can just go over the mountains to the neighboring kingdom and seek asylum from some neighboring prince. Now, in addition to it allowing for their escape, when they trip that trip lever, all of the palace's ramparts, buttresses, the entire array just comes crashing down upon the invaders' heads. So it's a booby trap. And I realized that those in power today viewed the World Trade Center in precisely that respect, so that when they attacked it in such a way as to knock out the load-bearing pillars of the building so that they themselves collapsed, that they themselves are the load-bearing pillars of the country. They knocked out the load-bearing pillars of New York. What is it? But it's a major financial city. It's where Wall Street is. They knocked out, in a sense, the pegs for the world economy, and they created an act of sabotage that the world has never recovered from. So it seems to me that the same linchpin would be provided for the Islamic world by taking out the very towers that you're speaking of in Kuala Lumpur.
Well, the question is who would do something like that? I can't imagine the Taliban doing something like that to their, I guess you could call them sponsors or compatriots. Unless, I mean, who would...
Well, why not? Because as you and I both know, they're really agent provocateurs, and that the Taliban, the Mujahideen, and Al-Qaeda are more like mercenaries that are under the employ of the CIA, which isn't even an American intelligence service. It's working for the Vatican. So the secret name for the CIA is the Knights of the Holy See, and they're also called the Company, which is the same name given to the Jesuit order of the Catholic Church, which regards itself as the company, being of the company of Jesus. So, in my view, they're just mercenary agent provocateurs under the control of the Vatican that could strike anywhere, anytime, any place, and to any population.
Well, this is true. We've seen this over the years, haven't we?
For sure.
Yeah.
They could be as much deployed against their own citizenry as they could the so-called enemy camp that they're supposed to be against. And the same goes for the CIA. They could just as easily kill you and I today as they could kill some Afghani or Pakistani citizen tomorrow. Perfect.
One more thing for me to worry about. Thank you very, very much. I certainly do appreciate that. Now, speaking of things killing us, let's move on to another story. I think we've pretty much exhausted the Flight 370 for 1 week. Otherwise, we're going to be here until midnight talking about this because it's a rabbit hole that just keeps giving and giving as far as I'm concerned. Let's move on.
That's great, though. I've got to commend you, though. That tower theory in Malaysia, that's brilliant.
I did not come up with that. I saw that on a blog post somewhere just a few days after the thing was hijacked, when the idea right after that flight data came out. Let me see here. Let me pull this back up on the screen for those of you on their video side. Right here. Right after that, the flight data came out of the waypoints where the plane turned, that people started talking about Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, and that's when the topic came up of crashing the thing into the Petronas Towers in Malaysia, because that's where a lot of the banking is done. That would be a devastating blow to that area of the world. That would be bad news. That might knocking down the World Trade Center didn't do the job. Let's try this one. See what happens. At any rate, here's one that I think you can sink your teeth into like a Bowie knife. Over at Activist Post, they had a story this past week that really got my dander up. And it's about a new drug that is going to be hitting the streets soon, courtesy of the FDA, that has more than a few people wondering, what the hell do we need a new painkiller that puts all others to shame? It's called Zohydro. And the warnings that Zohydro contains are, it is a long-lasting hydrocodone, and it exposes patients and others to the risk of opiate addiction, abuse, misuse, which can lead to overdose and death. Serious life-threatening or fatal respiratory depression may occur. Do not allow patients to chew the capsules, because that could release a fatal dose of hydrocodone into their systems. Accidental consumption of even one dose of hydrocodone, especially by children, can lead to an overdose. For patients requiring opiate therapy while pregnant, be aware that infants may require treatment for neonatal opiate withdrawal syndrome. Prolonged maternal use during pregnancy can result in neonatal opiate withdrawal syndrome, which can be life-threatening. West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin is protesting FDA approval of the drug. He's written a stunning letter to U.S. Health and Human Services head, our old friend Kathleen Sebelius. Senator Manchin noted that the FDA approved the drug despite strong opposition from its own anesthetic and analgesic drug Products Advisory Committee. This is highly significant. The FDA turned its back on its own panel of drug reviewers. Senator Manchin said this: simply put, FDA's approval of Zohydro ER in its current form must be stopped before this dangerous drug is sold to the public. Zohydro has up to 10 times as much hydrocodone as Vicodin and Lortab, and will come in a formulation that can be easily crushed, snorted, and injected. In other words, Zohydro, used as a painkiller, is a nightmare. If you've ever taken Vicodin, imagine a pill with 10 times the strength. The FDA, of course, in this time of tyranny, will do exactly what Barack Hussein Obama does when found out: double down and do it anyway. And what type of a personality doesn't know or care about right from wrong? That would be a psychopathic personality disorder. That's what that is. And don't send me emails telling me that we're not in tyranny right now, because we are. You can slather whatever lipstick you want to put on it, but the pig still snorts its way through slop no matter what you do. It is, in fact, an extremely dangerous drug. I cannot imagine, Tim, why in the hell they are going to put something like this on the market. I have a prescription for Vicodin that I have to use for my nerve pain. And believe you me, something that's 10 times more powerful than a Vicodin extra strength is absolutely total insanity to release something like that on the public. What's your take on that?
Well, we know that Ritalin is prescribed for a fictional disease. Leon Eisenberg admitted on his deathbed when he was 87 years of age that he invented it, that it was a complete fabrication, that there is no such thing as attention deficit hyperactive disorder. It was an invention. He said it's a perfect example of a fictional disease. He was quoted by Der Spiegel. There's no way that Der Spiegel magazine is going to risk one of the most solid reputations in journalism on a story that they're not absolutely certain is true, and it's supposed to be under the testimony of Leon Eisenberg himself that the claim was made, and there's no way that they're going to take on the Eisenberg family, which are probably very well to do, and get themselves into a lawsuit that's going to disgrace their publication's reputation and so forth. So you can rest assured that his testimony is real, and that he probably wanted to avoid going to the wrong place after death by, making a little confession on his deathbed in the hope that it would offer him some form of reprieve. These people are engaged in soul-selling activities, and they do it for short-term profit, not seeing the long-term pain that awaits them and the rest of the population for what they do and what they unleash on the public. But the companies that are behind them are really where you want to put the blame. Under tort law, the tortfeasor is the manufacturer or seller of the defective product. So if you want, we have to go after the ultimate tortfeasor and forget about the small little minions that don't matter. But the problem is, even when you cut off the Gorgon's head, it grows 3 new heads, because in the Nuremberg War Tribunals at the end of World War II, when they dealt with IG Farben as the chemical and industrial giant that had built Nazi Germany, which was in fact a subsidiary or daughter company of Standard Oil of New York, which had as its CEO John D. Rockefeller and his cohort Prescott Bush, the grandfather of the last previous reigning president. You can see that, even after they cut off the Gorgon's head, it grew 3 new heads, because right out of the ashes came the phoenixes that replaced IG Farben, which were Bayer, of Bayer aspirin fame, BASF, B-A-S-F, and Hosch, H-O-S-C-H, which are now, in today's term, 20 times bigger than IG Farben was at the height of the war. And you can see that by breaking it up into these 3 daughter companies, the Gorgon's heads have grown back as 3 new heads, and how are you supposed to cut off those heads, and how many more heads are they going to grow? I mean, it's just a nightmare. It's like, the Nazis, who were supposed to have been decimated and removed at the end of the war, and you find out, no, they're still in operation all over the world. And you could argue that the European Union and the North American Union and all these entities were of their creation, because the ambition of the Nazis was to unite Europe, and what have they done? And when you look at the NATO logo, you can see it's a disguised swastika. And, I know that the Prime Minister of my country is a Nazi. He's been known to have had associations and affiliations with a Nazi-related organization in the province of Alberta. And we know that George W. Bush was certainly a Nazi, because we know that his father and his grandfather were. So where is this all headed, my friends?
Yeah, that is the big question. And with this Zohydro, that just sounds like an evil name for a drug, anyways. One of the other things that Manchin said was, and I quote here, I am deeply troubled that the reason for Zohydro's ER's approval may be linked to the allegations that the FDA gave manufacturers of prescription drugs the opportunity to pay thousands of dollars for the privilege to attend private meetings with FDA officials. Allegations have been raised that a new scientifically questionable methodology for drug approval was created at these pay-to-play meetings. That certainly that just certainly sounds like pandering and just about any other nasty name you want to put on a relationship between a industry and the government. If you ask me, it's you're messing with people's lives when you do stuff like this, and that's not. I don't think it's a good thing at all. I don't. It just makes me extremely nervous.
Oh yeah. Well, we know that Donald Rumsfeld, another Nazi, you can call him a neocon if you like, but in essence I prefer neo-Nazi. He and the German name there is kind of interesting too, don't you think? But at any rate, he was instrumental in lobbying the FDA so that it would approve aspartame, which is known to be a killer and a nasty ingredient in 3,000 different food products. And when he was working for Cerla Industries, he ended up getting the approval that it needed so that it could come to different brand names and different labels like NutraSweet and saccharin or whatever. But it was always the same, aspartame. That's essentially what it was. And it's known to cause brain lesions, brain tumors, all kinds of physical disease maladies. And so when I look at all these different harmful drugs and the harmful side effects they produce, I realize that it's by intention and that it's a eugenics program and that there seems to be different tiers of medicine that the population are supposed to be privy to, so that if you're of the global elite camp, what you would call the first world, then you'll be given a much more healthy brand of medicine that's going to keep you alive and well into your 100th year, or your, in the case of the Queen Mother, what did she live to, 104? Henry Kissinger, he's in his 90s. They all live to exceptional ages, and they're kept in good trim by the medicine that they are given, which is homeopathic, whereas the rest of us are on the allopathic medicine given to us by the psychopaths. I find the path in there is kind of interesting. You know, it's psychopaths creating allopath medicine for us, and so I find that we're on a planet where there's a noticeable caste system, and you look at the banking system and you look at the financial sector, and it's pretty much the same. So you've got on the back of your $1 note down there the Great Seal of the Bavarian Illuminati, which is also the Great Seal of the United States, and very interestingly, they were founded in the same year, 1776. And you can see that there's a missing capstone. Well, they are the missing capstone, and they control everything from that cap-it-all position. They cap it all, and they do it with financial cap-it-all from the national cap-it-all. And those that are in the first world trade in gold, which is the sun element, which is Osiris. And those of us that are at the second world tier, even though you don't ever hear first world and second world, you only ever hear of third world. This is how the world is divided. We're trading in Mooney. And if you look at the dollar sign, it spells Isis, the moon goddess, I-S-I-S. And it's silver, which is the color of the moon, but then they ended up creating a paper note to substitute for the silver. You wouldn't want your pocket filled with these heavy silver dollars. And then people in the third world are trading in, you know, they're not trading in Mooney as we are. they're trading in the earth element, the bronze element, copper. They're getting paid in cents to do the labor that they do. And this is the system. This is how the planet is. You can even see it in the Olympic Games, the gold, silver, and the bronze medal, which is also attributable to what is really going on in terms of the racial categorizations on the planet, because the gold is for the gods, the silver is for the demigods, and the bronze is for the human hero. So if your expertise and your excellence approaches that of the gods, you're awarded the gold medal of the sun element, which is Osiris, or if you like, a disguised reference to Lucifer or Satan, because that's what the sun god really represents. And those who get the silver medal are getting the moon element, Isis or Diana, if you like. And so now you can see the symbolism and the secret coded significance of all the world's events that are happening and unfolding all around you. The fact that the Antichrist was seated by the moon goddess Diana, and that she died in a sacrifice and went to a dark place and died within a crypt, which was actually the traditional site of Diana worship. That hill in Paris where she died is Pont de l'Amour, which is the traditional site of Diana worship. And she died inside the catacombs where all the bodies of the dead virgin children were stored for centuries after the sacrifice ritual at the top of the hill. She died in her own ritual grounds as the moon goddess and as the one that would seed the child of Satan who would become the Antichrist. It's fascinating stuff, and it's hard for people to countenance and believe. My God, the lawyer that works in the office next door to me, he just can't even believe that you could even think or conceive of metaphysical evil or Satan or as the existence of any kind of dark lord. I mean, this is how effective the education system has been in the modern age, Bill, is that the devil so cleverly convinced the population that he doesn't exist.
That is quite a feat that he's pulled off. That's for sure. That's a very interesting concept that you've raised there. That's it just, you know, I keep thinking back, and this is one of my pet things, Tim, that when I look at the people that I respect, I don't know if you do or not, the people that I consider to be conservatives, the people that want government to be as small as possible, to leave us the hell alone, to get back to some sort of system that works for the people as opposed to the government. It's amazing that these people die early, get Alzheimer's, leave us way, way too soon when we could really use them. And people like Kissinger and Soros and the rest of them live to a ripe old age of 100, 105 or something like that. That's what always really gets to me. It's like, why do the people that we really need to give us to help us, to give us guidance, why are they always the ones that die too early, and the ones that we really don't need, the ones that are trying to control us, live to a ripe old age? And I think what you just said lends a lot of credence to that.
Yeah, they rely on homeopathic medicine, and it's gentle because it has no side effects. We rely on the pharmaceutical medicine, which is interesting because if you look at pharmacy, it comes from the Greek pharmakon, and in Greek the word pharmakon means remedy and poison. So the whole paradigm of medicine that we rely upon is a medicine which is assured to poison us with the side effects, even though it can administer a temporary cure for what ails us. The strength of the medicine is just so great that it compromises the health of our bodies in the process. So whether it's chemotherapy, where you're actually damaging as many healthy cells as you are the poisonous carcinogenic cells, the malignancy cell, you're damaging the healthy cells. And you're also, with chemotherapy, you're damaging the immune system. In fact, the AZT drug cocktails that were created to try to fight AIDS, ostensibly back in a few years ago, it was originally brought out in the 1970s as a drug to act as a chemotherapy treatment. It was found to be so reactive and so dangerous because it was too strong that they shelved it. But when people were given the death sentence of AIDS, they brought it back because when people were faced with the fear of dying this horrible death of AIDS, they were willing to undergo whatever in their desperation to forestall the effects of acquired immune deficiency syndrome. So they ended up taking these AZT drug cocktails. But the deaths that were listed as a result of this were that they had died of AIDS-related complications, AIDS-related death. In fact, it wasn't. It was medicine-induced death. They died from the AZT drug cocktails, provable by the statistics shown in Canada that the AIDS deaths from the AIDS pandemic peaked in Canada during the years when AZT was prescribed, which was only a 7-year period. When they discontinued it as the medicine regime, it found that the stats for AIDS plummeted down to record lows again, which means that the drug itself, the drug regime itself, was responsible for the deaths. So this is what's going on. And what I find appalling is that you are told that, medicine is a science. It's not. It's a pseudoscience as much as the psychiatric field is a pseudoscience. What am I saying here? Well, look, here you have a scientist that's, by his own admission, invented a disease disorder called ADHD. And then you have the fact that HIV/AIDS, well, there's no empirical evidence that any of the patients that are diagnosed with HIV/AIDS really are, because they never isolate the virus in their test. There's no definitive evidence that they have it because they're only isolating HIV-related antibodies. And while they say their tests are effective and that they work and that they know that they have these HIV-related antibodies in their bloodstream, I would say, how do you know? When by your own scientific papers you say that the virus mutates so quickly that it's impossible to track. Therefore, if the virus is mutating, then wouldn't the antibodies also have to mutate in order to basically track it on radar within the body? So, I'm sorry, but I don't see that there's any empirical evidence for showing that this patient or that patient is actually HIV positive, and it's been shown that there were many cases of misdiagnosis. Now imagine giving someone a drug based on them not even being sick, because I thought you were only supposed to medicate people who were observably sick. But you're telling this patient who's diagnosed on maybe even a false positive test that he's got HIV/AIDS, and then you're giving him a drug saying that you're trying to forestall the symptoms of acquired immune deficiency syndrome, whereupon he would become sick. So before he's even sick, you're giving him a drug under the pretext that he is going to become sick. But yet the very drug that he's given under the pretext that it's to forestall the symptoms of acquired immune deficiency syndrome so that he doesn't become sick are the very prescriptive drugs that make him become sick because it causes his immune system to collapse, as did AZT its very self. Because chemotherapy drugs are known to weaken the immune system. So what was AZT doing? But just that, which means that they were doing a medically induced immune deficiency syndrome attack upon the patient that was taking the AZT drug medications. So it's horrifying, but I actually do believe that the anti-Hippocratics, which are an elite branch of Freemasonry, have gained control of the medical associations around most of the world, and that they're actually launching a genocidal attack and a depopulation endeavor upon the human population. And that Agenda 21, which is disguised as a sustainable development program, is the elites trying to eliminate us or cull our population down to more manageable levels below 500 million as the Georgia Guidestones, which are sometimes called America's Stonehenge, state. In the Ten Commandments, that's the first commandment, to lower the population to below 500 million in perfect harmony with nature. And who was the one that commissioned that monument to go at the hilltop in the state of Georgia? But R.C. Rosenkreutz, which is an interesting pseudonym because that's Rosicrucians. R.C., Rosie Cross, Rosenkreutz, German for Rosie Cross. And that's a military knighthood organization controlled by the Vatican, which is the House of Cain, which means that the Cainite satanic bloodlines want to reduce the numbers of the Goyim on the planet because they regard us as an inferior race of swine. It's madness. Get me off this planet, Bill.
It is complete madness, and somehow I knew the Georgia Guidestones were going to come into the conversation somehow. Because I hate those things.
Yeah, let's go blow them up.
Yeah, or knock them over or something. But let's we're getting close to our 2-hour limit here. So let's finish up the show with a favorite subject of yours and mine, Fukushima.
Okay.
Over on NSNBC, not to be confused with MSNBC, NSNBC.com, on Friday, March 21st, 2014. The headline is Exposed, Death of Fukushima Workers Covered Up by TEPCO and the Government. The death of many Fukushima workers who die from radiation exposure is covered up by Fukushima Daiichi power plant operator TEPCO and the Japanese government, said a Japanese journalist who investigated the unreported deaths, adding that she found TEPCO memo instructing officials to cut her questions short appropriately and that police are following her around in an intimidating manner. When I read of this, Tim, apparently they're only counting the workers at TEPCO, at the Fukushima plant, that die on the job. Not the ones that die at home, not the ones that die in the hospital, not the ones that just drop dead suddenly while they're walking down the street. And apparently there are a lot of them that are going unreported. There are people dying. The workers that are... who knows what the hell they're doing, trying to keep this thing from melting to the center of the earth. But apparently a lot of them are dying, and they're covering it up.
Yeah, and I think it's more than just the workers that are dying and they're covering it up. I think it's the population itself. I mean, come on, 2 years ago they had announced that Japanese school children, to the tune of 70% of Japanese school children, were showing thyroid problems, and that they attributed the thyroid problem to them eating too much fish. And clearly, you know, there's something wrong with this story. And as for these pigs and cattle, like cows that glow in the dark, which they claim are so that farmers can see them in the night when they're trying to track their domestic livestock in the evening. They can find them by having had them bred to be that way, by having their genes combined with that of a glowfish so that they can glow in the dark, so that the farmers are able to actually isolate and find their livestock in the fields at night. I mean, come on, man. I mean, anyone who believes this has clearly just got to pull their head out of the ground or out of the sand. I mean, this is just madness. How can anyone believe such nonsense? I mean, clearly it's a cover story for the fact that these cattle are irradiated.
That's just... There's only one thing I have to say about that particular... That particular story, and that's bullshit. That's the only thing I can say. People are actually believing that that is just... Anyways, this was all revealed at the International Conference of the Effects of Nuclear Disasters on the Natural Environment and Human Health outside of Frankfurt. The conference was co-organized by the German chapter of the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War and the Protestant Church in Hesse-Nassau on March 6, 2014. The name of the freelance journalist is Mako Ashidori, and she was presented at the conference and a subsequent press conference, and that's available on video. All you got to do is go to nsnbc.com. They're a new international news agency. And let's see, Mako reported that she discovered a TEPCO memo in which Fukushima Daiichi operator TEPCO instructs employees to cut short her questions. And she was enrolled in the School of Life Sciences at Tottori University Facility of Medicine for 3 years. So she does have some medical experience. And the article goes on to talk about how she discovered this, that they're not counting the deaths of the workers when they're not on site. In other words, they have to die on site in order for them to be able to count these deaths as radiation related. So if they die at home, then it's not related to the plant, obviously. Even though like their fingers are falling off and they're growing four extra eyes. Seriously, they're actually saying that they're making the cows glow on purpose. That's a serious story, Tim. We may have lost the co-host of the show. Let me see here. According to Skype, we're still connected, but I am not hearing Tim at all. Testing. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me, Tim?
Yeah, I can hear you. I guess they didn't like my stories. But anyway.
The glowing cows. The glowing cows. That is, I find that just to be hysterical that they would actually say that they're doing it on purpose.
Yeah, honest to God, they claim that they took the genetic of the glowfish and they inserted it into the genetic profile of the livestock so that the farmers would be more easily able to track their own domestic livestock in the field at night.
Well, the first question, having grown up on a farm, would be, why in the hell are you out there trying to find your cows at night? That'd be the first question. What possible business would you have trying to find your cows at night? That's just stunning that they would actually expect people to believe that. And the thyroid disease I have heard about for at least the past 6 months, that the children are showing signs of thyroid disease. And how can it be from eating too much fish? Because fish are supposed to contain iodine, which is actually good for the thyroid system. Because, incidentally, folks, if you want to prevent radiation sickness, you don't have to go out and buy the expensive medications that they sell for that. All you need is sea kelp, which is extremely high in iodine, a natural form of iodine. That's what I have here at the SETV facilities. I have bottles and bottles of kelp tablets that I purchased before Fukushima became a problem. Because as soon as it happened, I said, I think I'm going to buy some kelp tablets straight away before all of the kelp becomes contaminated as well. Just
send it to you, Bill. Scientists create glow-in-the-dark pig using jellyfish genes.
There's the link right there. Let's take a look at the link and let's see what the link says. Okay, here we go. This is at digitaljournal.com. It's in their text section. Scientists create glow-in-the-dark pig using jellyfish beams. That is just so unbelievable. And they're doing this in China.
Glow-in-the-dark piglets. Yeah, glow-in-the-dark piglets created in China.
That is.
That's the next link. I'll send that one to you too.
That is. I think we've gone off the rails. We've gone off the rails. That's. I think we've completely lost control of our own show, Tim. That is absolutely stunning. This news coming out of Fukushima. It just keeps getting worse and worse. What do you think the end game is on this Fukushima thing? Because all of the media and all of the governments, as far as I can tell, are completely ignoring it. Even when something's happening on the west coast of the United States, they're ignoring it.
Well, we see a common pattern with the LA riots, no response. We see that with Hurricane Katrina, there was no response, or a very, very tardy one. And if you could see FEMA as being an agency that was supposed to help, they did the opposite. They convened these transit points where the firefighters and emergency management system teams from all over the country were brought to these airports and port facilities, and then instead of them being deployed to help those that were in New Orleans, they instead had them handing out pro-FEMA leaflets and flyers, and basically having them doing things that were of no import or value, delaying a proper response from occurring, and when it did occur, it was a lame response. And they actually had good citizens of the United States trying to help their fellow compatriots that were on flotillas of boats and then were turned back by FEMA. Well, in my view, whether it's an agency that's deployed to help or not, it should be up to the citizen whether they would like to risk their lives to help their fellow citizens. It shouldn't be up to a security agency of the U.S. government to decide whether they can do so or not. So that was wrongful in any way you could conceive of it, and they did it under the pretext that there could have been waterborne diseases and that the water levels were too high and it was unsafe and all of this. Well, it's up to the citizens to decide whether they want to help their fellow citizens. I don't believe that any agency should have that power to decide for them. And then, what did we find with the Gulf oil disaster? That it took 50 days for the so-called president, which is clearly not a president, he's just a sham, a complete scoundrel, a complete... I don't know whether you think that there's any possibility that I was right, that Obama's Osama. I mean, we've got to make a pop song. We've got to, at some point, you and I, we have to compose a pop song, Bill. Osama, Obama, Obama, Osama. I mean, it's going to be a hit. I just don't believe that guy should be in the White House another day. Like, what the hell is he doing there? I mean, I've heard of usurpers, and I've heard of people that don't belong on the throne, but this is just unbelievable. That he's been able to last in that job as long as he has is just the most successful black operation in history, I would say, and don't think that I was making a racial slur there. I wasn't. But this is just madness. How could he be in the office of the White House when he's clearly not eligible, and he's a foreigner, he's born in foreign territory, he's not even an American, you know the Constitution, you know what it says, that alone makes him a fraud and ineligible to be in the White House. So, I don't know, it's a nightmare. And then you have this Fukushima thing where you've got 4 reactors churning out high levels of cesium-137 radiation and other forms of radiation, including strontium, tritium, etc., all of which is pouring into the sea in large volumes, which TEPCO itself has denied and lied about for months and months and months, and finally disclosed a few months ago that something in the neighborhood of 300 tons of radioactive seawater were pouring into the Pacific Ocean. And there's no response. I mean, there should have been a UN coordinated emergency response bringing in sky cats and whatever type of deployment was necessary in order to remove all of the spent fuel reactors and to get them into a safe haven and to properly contain everything and encase it in clay so that the cesium and other forms of radiation couldn't leak into the environment. But no. Do you think they could have handled anything properly? Of course not. Was there any even attempt to handle it? No. Did the international community convene an emergency meeting to try to decide on what to do? Because it affects the entire population of the planet, not just Japan. Nothing. So what do we find with all of these emergencies that have happened all over the world is that there's no response. Just a simple example here in Toronto where we have this ice storm and branches all over the city. You know, they still haven't managed to come and collect the branches and cart them away. And it's 4 months after the fact.
That's crazy.
It's coming up to 4 months after the fact, and they still haven't managed to even clear the branches from some streets.
You would think that they would have enough wood chippers up there to take care of that, or they would call in from another area. Because I know here in the States, when like in Ohio or Pennsylvania, they have an ice storm or something like that, they'll have electric workers from electric companies coming from all over the region. From other utilities coming in to help out, because we get that here in Michigan when we have a tornado go through or a real bad storm. We get people up here from Ohio and Indiana and Illinois, and they help out, and we help them out. I don't understand why they wouldn't call in help from the states, because I know right here in Saline we have a giant wood trimming company that has hundreds of chippers that are just sitting there in their parking lot most of the time. I don't understand that at all.
Yeah, I hear. Now, you one, but they've got glow-in-the-dark sheep created by Uruguayan scientists down in South America. Oh, this is too fun.
You know what we need is glow-in-the-dark cats. That's
they've got those. Hang on. I swear to God, I kid you not. Where is that now? It was up at the top of the list. Aha. South Korean scientists altered a cat's DNA to make it glow in the dark, then took that DNA and cloned other glow-in-the-dark cats from it.
Because I could use a couple of glow-in-the-dark cats, because I don't know what these things are my cats are doing at night. I want to be able to keep an eye on them.
There you go. I just sent you the link.
Okay, let's take a look at that, because that's how we're gonna end the show, folks. Is we're gonna talk about glow-in-the-dark cats, because we're coming up on 2 hours, and oh my God, there they are, yeah, glow-in-the-dark cats. Holy crap, that's unbelievable. They actually do have glow-in-the-dark cats. Whatever few people are left in the audience, Tim, I think they have now left. I got to get me a glow-in-the-dark cat. That is just too funny. Oh, man. Oh. Tim, man, am I glad you came on the show tonight. That's just a type of comic relief that I needed there. Oh, my goodness. Folks, we're coming up on 2 hours, and those of you that don't know the Skype antics, Skype limits your calls to 2 hours. So Tim is about to get hung up on by the Skype system. So I am going to thank him right now for being on the show, and we're going to end the show on that note. Tim, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. It was very informative.
Oh, it was a delight, as always.
Except for the
do it again soon.
Except for the glow-in-the-dark cats and cows. That's just... they look evil, too. As glow-in-the-dark cats, they look even more evil than a regular cat does. Holy cow. All right, Tim. That's it for the show, folks. I appreciate everybody tuning in, and those of you that are going to watch the video archive, hopefully you have been informed and entertained. And my name is Bill Zam, and he is Tim Spearman. Tim, don't go anywhere. I am going to end the show, and then we can talk off the air. Let me go over here and click on this, and click this, and